Let me read to you a passage from the 8th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 11 to 13. It's the Gospel for Monday of the 6th week in Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, "The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, 'Why does this generation ask for a miraculous sign? I tell you the truth, no sign will be given to it.' Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side." That's from Mark chapter 8, verses 11 to 13. What does this suggest to us? Well, my impression is that outside the population of believers who truly practice their religion, miracles are generally viewed with disinterest and skepticism. Of course, the Catholic Church, for instance, views claims of miracles with some skepticism too. The assumption is that things happen according to the laws of nature, that nature of which God is the author, until in some particular case the contrary is shown to have moral certainty. Newman once claimed in a sermon of 1826 that it was Revelation's insistence on one infinite creator which was a significant stimulus to the scientific mentality. Prior to the dogma of one creator of all, man tended to consider the governance of the world as being in the hands of a host of deities, each with a different stake in the world's activity. Neptune was involved with the sea, Jove was involved with war, and so forth. That is to say, the world was not governed according to consistent laws coming from the one creator, but according to the different whims and aims of this or that deity. So the world's functioning could not be studied systematically. When scientific and empirical investigation did gather momentum, the notion of consistent physical laws embedded in the course and constitution of the world was supported by the acceptance of a single supreme God. So, though God might be later disregarded and abandoned, he was taken to have done a good work in favouring the assumption of a consistent universe that could be studied scientifically. In fact, we have gone beyond this to assume that miracles are like magician's tricks. If only we knew what is happening out of sight, behind the scenes, we could explain everything that we see being done. It is also assumed that religion rests on claims of miracles, whereas in reality it is only part of the broad basis of religion. The long and the short of it is that there is, among very many, a modern prejudice against claims of miracles. When the Church accepts the fact of a miracle as a divine stamp of approval for its conclusion that an individual practiced heroic Christian virtue, that ecclesiastical decision about miracles tends to be dismissed as slightly ridiculous and certainly overcredulous. The miracle is a non-event. So it is taken. The modern prejudice against claims of miracles is in effect a statement that they are so unlikely as not to warrant acceptance. They lack all antecedent probability, so they cannot be accepted seriously. This prior assumption against their probability can be so great as to leave a person absolutely cold in the face of excellent evidence for the miracle in question. It reminds us that the acceptance of something beyond temporal experience is not just a matter of rational evidence, nor even that seeing is believing. Of critical importance are fundamental attitudes and prior assumptions in the face of reality. Everything hinges on one's starting points, where one is coming from, what one's fundamental assumptions and beliefs are. And this brings us to our Gospel today that I read earlier from Mark chapter 8 verses 11 to 13. We read that the Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. They were not instances, these Pharisees, of modern secular man, instinctively rejecting the notion of a miracle while condescendingly tolerant of benighted believers and religious institutions such as the Catholic Church. No, the Pharisees absolutely accepted miracles and demanded them. But the problem was still a matter of their prior assumptions, their beliefs and attitudes. They were hostile towards Jesus Christ, and their request for a sign from heaven was but the manifestation of this hostility. Even if Jesus had provided them with a sign from heaven there and then, they would not have believed. On one occasion, our Lord was teaching a crowd in a filled house, and from the roof there was lowered a paralytic on his stretcher. Our Lord proceeded to forgive the man's sins, and by way of proof of his authority to do this, he proceeded forthwith to heal the man of his paralysis. But the scribes and Pharisees immediately went off into consultation with one another on how to do away with him. The miracle had absolutely no effect. In our gospel today, our Lord sees in the hearts of his interlocutors the same hostile attitude of heart. Miracles would have no effect on them. They asked for a sign from heaven. He gave forth a deep sigh and left them. Let us take our brief gospel passage today that I read earlier as a reminder of something of fundamental importance in any religious life and in life in general. I refer to the state of a man's heart. Everything depends on this. God asks of us that we love him with all our heart, mind, soul and strength. With such an attitude, we shall be open to all that God chooses to do in our regard. Let us then give him our hearts and follow him to the end. We shall indeed see many signs of his person and his love.